say hello to James, who's joined us. James, sorry, obviously we've started without you. I'm sure you knew that was going to happen because you know we're like with time, right? But James, hello as always, and it's nice to see you, mate. Sorry, Sally, come in, please.
That's okay. I've got a wee bit of from previous employment, got a wee bit of experience of Adam. So I thought I would come in and kind of give a wee bit. I'm not obviously Kathy and Rachel. But Adam kind of gives you it gives you an overview, so it will give you the technology enabled care stuff, and then it will also show you the kind of stuff you can buy, like the more citizen tech that you could probably more affordable stuff, and kind of gives you the compare and contrast between. And they use a user group of people with lived experience and their carers to test the stuff out. So all the stuff on the About Digital and Me Adam platform has all been user tested. So just to give you that wee bit more information.
It's excellent. Yeah, I didn't know that myself. Sorry, I think you're on mute as well.
No, sorry, I just stuck up our concert. Thanks, Alex. Great. Obviously, people can get a look at that, and we'll look forward to the presentation from Kathy and Rachel early in the new year. But if anybody's got any sort of queries and beforehand, please sort of save them up, and we'll we'll cover that off in our next meeting if that's all right. So, excellent. James, have you got anything to add at this point before I kind of move on to the agenda as listed here?
No, just morning everyone. Sorry for being a wee bit late. Great to see everyone, and yeah, looking forward to hearing about the other topics being discussed today. It's a jam-packed agenda, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, brilliant. We've now got 30 of us online, so a great turnout as always. Maybe they thought people were getting virtual mince pies or something like that. It's a bit of an impossibility, my friends. So just have to pretend. Okay, so you can see the agenda there. Obviously, we've had to take the Adam and postpone that to next year. We'll move on then to Lyndon Fraser, an overview of the ChromeOS Flex operating system, which again is well beyond my capabilities. So please, Lyndon, it'll be nice to hear from you.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. Good to meet you all. Thanks, Ross and James, for the invitation as well. So yes, I'm joining you from Google. I'm actually in the part of Google that looks after all things ChromeOS. So that's Chromebooks, and what we'll be speaking about for the next 10 minutes is ChromeOS Flex, which I will go into in a bit more detail. Let me just share. You've got the Googler trying to work out Teams this morning, so let's see how we get on. There we go. I do that. Perfect. Hopefully that's coming up okay for you all.
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Yeah. So as I mentioned, Lyndon Fraser from Google. I look after the public sector space as part of the Google team. So all things central government, local government, and the NHS as well. And much of our discussions of late, particularly within the local government space, has been around digital inclusion, right? And that's been really led by this technology, ChromeOS Flex, which enables organizations to extend the life of Windows devices, right? And give them a second life. So that's what we'll be going into in a little bit more detail. But before we begin that, for those who maybe aren't familiar with ChromeOS, it's an operating system similar to, if you think about Windows and you think about Mac, Chrome is kind of Google's operating system. A cloud-based OS, been around since 2010. Lots of success in the education space. So some of you might have heard of it with sons and daughters who might be on Chrome devices at their schools. And we're beginning to see a lot more organizations and enterprises and corporates begin to take up Chrome as well. And the reason behind that, I'll just go through some of what makes Chrome quite different. First off is the security posture. So being a cloud-based OS, it's also a read-only OS, which means you can't run executables on Chrome, and it's got a multi-layered security posture, which means we can make statements such as the one that you see on the screen there, that there's been 0 reported ransomware attacks ever through a Chrome OS device. So security is a big reason why organizations are beginning to look at Chrome. The simplicity of deploying devices as well, right? The management of endpoints can be quite time consuming, but with a cloud-based OS, it becomes very, very simple with automated updates happening in the background. We've got examples of customers with tens of thousands of devices being managed by a single administrator, right? So very, very simple in terms of the management side of things. A modern employee experience, so a device that thinks it's more like a smartphone, so it boots up in a few seconds and you're immediately into your applications. The speed of the devices provides a very modern employee experience. Sustainability is a big thing in our world as well. Every Chromebook from date of manufacture is supported by Google with updates for 10 years. We're really trying to challenge that notion that a laptop should kind of last 4 or 5 years, right? And trying to double that and say we should really, particularly with a lightweight OS like Chrome, be able to expect a lot longer from our devices. They also run with half of the energy consumed as well. And then the TCO side of things as well. Part of the reason why it's been so popular in the education space is the total cost of ownership on a Chromebook. Not only is the hardware slightly cheaper, but things like no need for antivirus software, encryption software, so quite a lot of savings there. And then the length of duration that you'll be using that device as well. From a local government perspective, where we're seeing quite a big uptake is around use cases such as devices, shared devices for frontline staff who have a digital identity, maybe don't need a one-to-one device model, but could come in and grab a device off a rack and log in with their credentials to access training and things like that. Which leads me on to the next one, which is really around the training of employees. Kiosk, digital signage is a big area for us as well. And then digital inclusion, I'll open the last two because this is the premise of this presentation today, really is around digital inclusion. We're seeing a big uptake of Chrome to solve for some of this as well, primarily driven through a technology called ChromeOS Flex. And what ChromeOS Flex does is it will take a Windows laptop that might be 4 or 5, 6 years old. As long as it's under 10 years old, it's supported. We have a number of makes and models that have been supported to run Flex. Essentially, what it will do is it replaces the operating system that is on that laptop, and it replaces it with a version of ChromeOS, and it effectively turns that laptop into a Chromebook, right? So if you've got older Windows laptops lying around that are maybe reaching end of life, you could potentially eke out another 3, 4, 5 years of useful life by using something like ChromeOS Flex. There's a QR code on the screen here. I believe we'll share the presentation after anyway, but that will take you to a page that lists all of the makes and models of Windows devices that are supported to run ChromeOS Flex. And how it works, it's done via a USB stick where you install ChromeOS Flex onto the device. That USB stick can be used on multiple devices to run through the installation process. It's about a 5 to 8 minute process, right, to get ChromeOS Flex fully installed on a device. You then reboot that machine and you've got a device that boots up in 6 seconds and you're straight into the browser, right, for applications. We do have options for network deployment as well if you're wanting to do multiple devices at once. Why it's interesting from a digital inclusion perspective is a lot of private sector businesses and the public sector are needing to face up to the fact that Windows 10 end of support is fast approaching, right? It ends in October next year, which means there's a lot of devices out there. Canalys estimates around 240 million PCs potentially could be impacted by this and not able to run Windows 11, which means there's suddenly a choice. And some of these laptops and PCs might only be 5 or 6 years old, right? So with Flex, what we're beginning to say is you could either have those devices go off to get chipped up and sent to landfill, or potentially with Flex, you could have another 3 or 4 years of secure life from that device. And so there's an opportunity here to kind of interrupt and disrupt that path of that device, and hopefully give some of these devices a second life that could fuel some of the work that you're doing in the digital inclusion space. I'll touch on a UK council here, Kirklees. They've got about, they're actually up to about 1,700 devices now that are being made available within the community as a way of helping to bridge the digital divide there. They make them available as long-term loan units through their library services team. And they've had a lot of success with that program. We've got a blog post on this that goes into a bit more detail about that. One other example I'll just share is some of the work that we're doing with the Royal Air Force Air Cadets as well. A lot of their content has moved digital. And what they found is there were cadets who didn't have access to a device at home to be able to do some of that coursework. So they were actually losing cadets because of that. They've reached out to industry partners. So they've reached out to the likes of Boeing and BAE Systems and Rolls-Royce and Serco and others who they work closely with to make them aware of ChromeOS Flex as a technology, and say if they are able to donate some of those Windows 10 devices that are hitting end of life, there's a number of cadets who would be in need of those. So they've got about 3,500 devices now that they put ChromeOS Flex onto and put those into the hands of their cadets. So that's another nice story where they've kind of connected that with the industry partners. A lot of our conversations with councils at the moment are around identifying some of the top employers in your region. So I guess people like Weir Group and Scottish Power and others, and begin to maybe have that conversation about what are they doing with those end-of-life devices? Is there a way of maybe giving them a second life if it goes to people in the community who need those devices, right? And I think a lot of private sector organizations would opt to do that, right? If given the opportunity. So that's a little bit more about Kirklees. We also work with councils around the management side of things of devices. We tend to couple a lot of the councils up with a not-for-profit organization who's like a UK registered charity. That way you can benefit from the charitable pricing around the management side of things. And so you can enroll those devices to apply some of the security benefits, things like enforcing safe browsing policies. If a device does get lost or stolen, you can turn it into a brick effectively. You've got some of additional controls around the inventory management side of things. In particular, are the devices actually being used? Which I know for a lot of the digital inclusion programs, when the devices go out, you do want to make sure that they are in regularly use, especially a year down the line. How many of those devices have been used, right, by the users? And if they're not being used, why is that, right? Is there some training requirements that might need to take place there? And then we do have it's something called manage guest session, which actually can be applied to the device, which means that you immediately boot into the browser of that device without any need for a login, right? Because I think where some of the programs can go wrong is somebody's given a laptop, but they might not even have an email address, right? They might not even know what an email address is in terms of going in and saying, do I need to create a Google identity or a Microsoft identity to get into this device? Managed guest session navigates entirely around that and immediately boots them into the browser, into a secure session in the browser. And you can configure it with bookmarks and things like that you might want that user to be able to access, whether that's job sites or links to NHS info or whatever it might be. So that managed guest session is a really interesting space as well. And that, for the not-for-profit side of things, just to give you an idea of the pricing there, that's a £30 license that lasts for the lifetime of that device. So again, we will support all devices for 10 years from the original date of manufacture if it's a Chromebook, but we also apply that same to Flex. So if it's a Windows device that might be 5 years old and you put Flex onto that device, Google will support it for a further 5 years. To get access to all of the controls on the not-for-profit side of things, that would be a £30 license for the life of that device. And I believe I think I might be just on 10 minutes, maybe a little bit over. Apologies.
Lyndon, you've done a great job there. And we're going to allow you that wee bit of extra because obviously we something cancelled. But that was a really, really interesting presentation. Really enjoyed it. My brain's already starting to kind of light up with the potential of, how do you extend life, and the idea that the private sector would be keen to maybe get involved with some charities and pass on some devices if they had the understanding that you presented here today. I've got a couple of things I'd like to raise, but obviously I want to open it up to everybody else. First, any questions or queries or points? Ross, sorry.
Yeah, I'll dive in. Just two questions here. The first one, so the enrollment for sort of remote management, is there a limit on how many devices you can enroll for, or is it like dependent on how many licenses you've got?
Yeah, no. So for Flex to convert a laptop, like a Windows laptop, as a consumer, it's completely free. So if you've got an old laptop that's on that list lying around your house, you could go and put Flex on it, convert it into a Chromebook, and that's that. If you did want to apply the management side, you would need a license that goes into the console, and then a device consumes one of those licenses. There's no limit to that. So we've got school districts who have hundreds of thousands of devices enrolled against the console, as an example.
Excellent. I will. The second question quickly was, is all the management for it, is it all based through the browser, or would somebody need to download like other software to use the management side of things?
It's all cloud-based management. Yeah, so it's a cloud-based admin console. There's about 500 policies kind of in there. It's a very, very simple process when we speak about management. I know management can kind of frighten people because they think, oh, management, that sounds tricky, and there's probably a big lot of overhead. I use that example of there's a particular organization stood up on stage. They've got 40,000 devices being managed today with a single administrator, right? So it's a very different proposition to managing other operating systems. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. James.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks, Lyndon, for that really interesting presentation. Suppose today it was to invite Lyndon along to let members see how you could potentially extend the lifespan of devices or end of life devices. I suppose both professionally and personally to support service users. I'm also conscious that organisations such as Renfrewshire Council, we have contracts in place with third parties to dispose of our devices at this moment in time. However, other organisations and charities, etc., might not. So they might have devices that's spare, that's lying around, that's end of life, that they've not disposed of. That could potentially be repurposed to either be set up as device lending libraries or initiatives to support digital inclusion. But the question that I suppose I was quite a couple of questions, if that's okay, Lyndon. So a key part of being online is to learn the foundational and the essential digital skills. The first question is around, are there opportunities to install word processing type applications and spreadsheets to support people to using ChromeOS Flex? And I suppose just for the other question was for the rest of the members on the call was to think about, do you have any devices? Could you potentially use ChromeOS Flex within your organisation or personally to support digital inclusion? So the first part was just around the word processing and spreadsheet. Lyndon, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I didn't mention, we've got funding available for all councils as well, and charitable organizations who are looking at this, right, to kind of guide them through. The purpose behind the funding is to get them started in the console, get them started with the first devices and the process of installing Flex onto those devices, and then getting the configuration right. Another part of that will touch on what James mentioned there, configuring it for the users, right? That will receive the devices. So The use cases will vary, right? Some will want simple kind of browsing style use cases. It is a cloud-based OS, so all of the applications and everything like that would need to be made available through the browser. So there are word processing options, right, through Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, LibreOffice, and others, but they would be confined to the browser use for that. But as part of the funding, we would tend to guide the organizations through the options to get them configured for those users. Another important part that I'll mention is the accessibility settings, right, which is very, very strong in the world of Chrome because of our presence in education. It has to be. But again, part of that management piece would be you can configure and enforce accessibility features, right, on the devices too.
Thank you, Lyndon. Any other queries or questions? It was interesting, James, you brought up there the idea of the public sector and the arrangements they have, because we were talking there about the private sector potentially being involved in handing over, I'll use the word brick because I've sticks with me for Lyndon's presentation. The fact that I've got a laptop lying in my cupboard that's just a brick, is there other cupboards in the public sector that have got that as well as the private sector? And I was going to ask Phil actually, but I think you maybe covered it, Phil, but I don't know if you had any comment to make relating to this, because there's obviously massive opportunities here, isn't there, in terms of sustaining the life and obviously just that aspect of digital inclusion, you know?
I think absolutely there can be, Alan. It's quite complex in terms of the local authority side of it. You know, the council has sort of device life cycle in that sense is quite complex. There's a number of different challenges there around budget availability, around the requirements for what the device actually needs to do. You know, and some of that can be limited then in terms of it either being a Windows operating system or a Chrome operating system, etc. There's things like partnerships that we already have in place with suppliers that James was alluding to there as well, and obviously also then the sort of wider supporting and maintenance stuff there that Lyndon was alluding to that you can do if you want to sort of manage these devices as well. So it's quite a kind of complex environment that we have, and you might think it's easy to just say the council must have thousands of devices that it must be able to give away, and there is you know, there are things in place that we do already around with our recycling partner, as James was saying there, and there's a percentage of devices that do come back into the community. But we have looked at ChromeOS, and Chrome's used within the education sector, so our schools have quite a large consumption of that at the moment, because a lot of the requirements there are for those pupils to just get to the internet and do stuff on the internet. From a corporate point of view in the council, it's a bit more challenging because a lot of the stuff that people have to do needs a more powerful device, and it needs stuff that's local onto the device and stuff like that as well. So and we have looked at other models in terms of recycling and looking at maybe putting something like ChromeOS onto devices to redistribute them to the community. But again, it's challenging in terms of budgets, because actually there's a cost to that as well, and that would depend on the council's current sort of capabilities and structure and resources to do that. So I sound like I'm being a wee bit negative about it there. It is an absolutely fantastic opportunity, but it is. I think I'm just pointing out, you know, if you think it might be, it's a no-brainer for an organisation our size, it is something that we're looked at, and it's not something that's off the table. It's something that we'll continue to look at, but there's a kind of complex ecosystem, if that's the right word, to put around our devices that doesn't make it quite as straightforward as we would like it to be.
No, I completely understand, Phil, and obviously it'll be the same for other public sector partners, police, health, etc. in relation to that, but I don't mind. It's one of those things I would probably quite keen to bring up as part of the community planning partnerships work, because obviously we're looking at a lot of sort of targets around obviously green, etc. So it's just that, and obviously there's a whole obviously digital inclusion aspect to this. But no, I appreciate a lot of that. But I think it is interesting, and we've already had some success with private sector organisations, Lyndon, handing over devices to us for distribution in small numbers. But this might make it slightly easier for organisations to consider that, so I think that's really useful. Before I bring Dora in as a last question, because I'm conscious of time, everybody's ears pricked up from the third sector that's on the call, I'm sure, when you mentioned funding available. I know you said it was funding available from public sector and other organisations, so I'd be keen obviously to be directed to where that is so we could share that. So is that something you could furnish us with, Lyndon?
Absolutely, yeah, I will share. We make it available through a few partners that we work with in the UK today. So I'll share details of that following the call today. Okay,
thank you, Lyndon. That's great. I'm going to bring Dora in. Just a lot of stuff in the chat there, folks. If you want to check it out, Dora.
Right. Hello, everybody again, and what an amazing presentation and an amazing opportunity that you guys offer. I just have a couple very quick questions. So, did I understand correctly that ChromeOS only replaces Windows operating systems, and would that be on any device? So that's my first question. And then the second question, I recall you mentioned that the license is free for individuals. So if I understood correctly, it's only if some sort of manager would like to use it that they would have to pay a license. Other than that, if it is for everyday users, like service users of a charity, for instance, they wouldn't have to pay something if we downloaded it on their device. And lastly, could we have your email address? Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
That was 3 questions, Dora, by the way. So anyway.
She snuck a third one in there. I'll answer them really, really quickly because conscious I'm probably hogging a bit of the time on the session. But so the first question around the devices in the chat, I've dropped a link through to all of the makes and models of devices that are certified. That just means somebody at Google has put Flex on it, made sure the trackpad works, the camera works, and it will be ongoing tested by Google. The nice thing with that too, it shows you when we support them until, so whether it's 2030 or 2032 or whatever it might be. So that's the link to the devices. You absolutely can have my email address. I'll share that. I guess via Ross and James Allen, you can share that out as well. I'm trying to remember your second question, Dora.
So the one question was,
oh yes, licensing. Apologies.
Yes, yeah.
So
That's fine.
to get a USB stick and stick it in the side of one of those laptops and convert it to become a Chromebook effectively is completely free. So Flex is totally free. If you wanted to then enroll that Chromebook within a management pane to begin to apply policies to it, that's where you would need the management license. And so what we tend to do is, if it's for a digital inclusion initiative, we would tend to say work with a not-for-profit organization so that you can benefit from the not-for-profit pricing that Google offers. And to give you an idea of that is that £30 price versus a £40 annual price, right? So it's quite a significant difference in terms of the cost of the management there.
Lyndon, thanks a lot. Dora,
Well,
okay?
Super.
Yes,
Thanks,
yes,
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you. Lyndon, listen, you're more than free to stay with us. I thought everybody really obviously responded really well to that. It was a great presentation. But if you need to get off, that's great as well. So I really appreciate it. No doubt we'll be in touch through James, Ross, myself to get more information from you. But thank you.
Super. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, we'll move on then to a friend of Digiren who always attends, Mr. Jason Railton. And Jason, you're going to talk us through the digital charter, aren't you?
I am, Alan. It's so nice to be back at Digiren. I don't think I've been for a while, so it's nice to see so many familiar smiling faces. But yes, I am going to talk through the charter. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully not embarrass myself by sharing the wrong screen, which is something I do on a regular basis. Let's see. I'm also due a new laptop. This is so slow. It's painful, actually. But it's fine. It's fine. There are worse things happening in the world. Okay, there we go. So yeah, hello everyone. Nice to see you all again, and nice to see so many names that I recognise and faces that I haven't seen for a while. Like Alan said, I want to just take 10 minutes of your time today to talk through Scotland's Digital Inclusion Charter. For anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Jason. I work with SCVO. For those of you that don't know SCVO, the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, we are Scotland's national membership body for charities. Specifically though, I work in the digital inclusion team, so working with organisations across the public, private and voluntary sectors to think about digital inclusion within their services and how we can support people to get online. I suppose really just to set the context behind the Digital Inclusion Charter, I don't have to explain this to the members on this call about the scale or the state of digital exclusion in Scotland. But But I guess the context here is that even in the year 2024, there are still 700,000 people who don't have essential digital skills and are therefore locked out. There are 620,000 people in Scotland that are in data poverty and don't have enough data to access the internet. We live in a time where people with a disability are 2.5 times less likely to be online. People are paying over £1,000 more a year for goods and services that they can get cheaper online. And we're living constantly in a world where unemployed people are at a double disadvantage and being increasingly locked out of the job market. So as we move further into this digital reality, we're leaving more and more people behind. And I think this is particularly pertinent within the public sector or within organizations that deliver services, because when we necessitate online for people, we are increasingly locking them out. Our whole point at SCVO within the digital team is that in 2024, we just don't think this is fair. We are of the opinion that we all have a role to play and we all have a responsibility for digital inclusion in Scotland. And that's why we have launched Scotland's Digital Inclusion Charter. And I suppose a little bit more context behind that is that we have had a charter for digital inclusion in Scotland for the last 10 years. You might remember it in its previous incarnation as the Digital Participation Charter. Over those 10 years, more than 700 organisations from across 3 sectors signed up to the charter and were really committed to making our society a lot fairer and a lot more digitally inclusive. But like everything digital, it can't stay static. So as things change, and in this post-pandemic world we live in, we knew that the charter that we needed for 2024 had to better reflect that world that we live in now. We wanted a charter that was much better at articulating or demonstrating how people can get involved within digital inclusion work within their services or within their community. And I think the common frustration that a lot of us have that work in digital inclusion or do work with people in terms of digital is that describing what we do and why can be a bit of a challenge. There are so many people that still see digital as a luxury rather than a necessity, and that's something that we all have a role in advocating to change. What's always really nice about coming to things like Digiren and talking about the charter is I'm always talking to people who are already very vociferous about digital inclusion and already really passionate about it. So it's not always, it's not a hard job for me to sell this to you. But what we wanted to do with the charter this time around was really create a framework for action. We wanted to create a platform, I guess, that supports, guides and recognises the work that you do in digital inclusion across Scotland, but specifically in Renfrewshire, which we always highlight as an area of best practice. And I suppose that's why the charter that I'm about to show you, for us, it's more than just a collection of promises. I know there are so many charters for different things out there that say we pledge to do this, we commit to do this. But with ours, hopefully you'll see as we go through it, it really is about creating that framework for action that is both scalable and responsive, but hopefully ready to meet you where you are. So this is what our charter looks like. It is 5 new pledges that reflect how we understand digital inclusion to work best. We designed the charter in collaboration with a lot of people who pioneer and drive this field forward. I know a lot of people on the call were involved in those early discussions about what a new charter could look like. I'm very grateful for that input. And so what we've done effectively is take the process of digital inclusion and how digital inclusion works for organisations and in organisations and make that, I guess, into a bit of a framework. What we like, or what we've tried to do with the charter, is make sure that the pledges are applicable to organisations of every size. So we want grassroots charities as well as massive organisations, big conglomerates, to sign up to this charter. The pledges are really broad enough for us all to fit into. So what I'm going to do very quickly now is just take you through the 5 different pledges and describe a little bit about what they mean. So our first pledge is around understanding. So it says that we commit to understanding digital exclusion and how it impacts the people that we work with. This pledge is really about knowing our stuff. So it's about knowing what the issues that your customers and service users are facing, and importantly, being able to explain what that means and building evidence to support it. We've all faced the frustration of digital exclusion being very much a hidden inequality. So I think until we can understand it and until we can articulate it, we can't make change happen. So the Understanding Pledge is really our promise to care about the cause of digital exclusion. The second pledge is around approach. So we commit to delivering on digital inclusion across our organisation based on our understanding of need. So this is about the kind of support that we deliver, and really about making sure that it's the right support, the right kind of support that the people that we're working with need. This pledge really came about because we understand that we live in a world where finding the right support isn't always easy. So we want to make sure that organisations are providing what people need, not just what they think people need. So this is really our commitment to delivering the right thing and delivering the thing right. The third pledge is around resource. So we commit to identifying and utilising appropriate resources for digital inclusion. This pledge is really about, it's about recognising what we have as organisations and communities. So whether those are physical or human or financial resources, how can they contribute to greater digital inclusion? We need to move past thinking that we don't have anything to contribute to this as a cause. Being creative with what we have can make such a massive difference to people. So this is really, I guess, our commitment to playing our part in a much fairer Scotland. The fourth pledge is partnership. So we commit to sharing and working in genuine partnership where we can to promote and advance digital inclusion. This one for us is really important because it's really about recognising the value that partnership working can bring to our efforts within digital inclusion. And really that is all about reducing silo working, reducing duplication across services, and being more open and willing to share the resources that we do have. The partnership element for us is really important because when an inequality is hidden, we need to make sure that we're working together cohesively and coherently to fight it. So this is really our commitment, I guess, to working together to make sure people can get the support that they need. And our last pledge is community. So we commit to contributing towards a wider conversation, developing a sense of community and being part of something bigger, because digital inclusion is everyone's responsibility. And this pledge is really about us coming together and being underscored by a common purpose. It's what we learned from the previous incarnation of the Charter that people liked most about being a signatory. It's being part of something bigger and understanding that each of us has an individual role to play for a much bigger collective solution, I suppose. This is really about our whole being worth more than the sum of our parts, and us coming together, sharing resources, understanding where each other's coming from, and really building a community around digital inclusion in Scotland. And just to finish up, I guess it's coming back to that, not sales pitch, but I guess kind of sales pitch of why bother signing up to the Charter? Is it just another box to tick? We don't think so, because what we have learned, particularly recently in, I guess, some of you will be familiar with the Audit Scotland report that came out about tackling digital exclusion across Scotland. I know they did an event at Paisley Library. What the clear message from that was that there needs to be a greater leadership within digital inclusion in Scotland. And actually, our strength comes from our numbers and recognising each other, but really building, I guess, networks and connections between all of us to make sure that we're advocating for what we want to advocate for. Since the pandemic and since things have gone back to normal, digital inclusion has slipped off the agenda. It doesn't seem to be a priority anymore, and that's not something we're comfortable with. So the Charter is really our collective voice in saying digital inclusion is important. We're going to support organisations with it, but it has to stay on the agenda. And most importantly, for every organisation, it is free. It's not difficult to sign up. You can head to digitalinclusion.scot or scan the QR code there. Sign up. More than happy to have conversations with you as organisations or individuals about what the Charter might mean for you and how you can sign up. But I'm conscious I've gone a minute and a half over my allotted time, so Alan will be fizzing, so I'm going to stop there. But happy to have any questions or conversations.
Thanks, Jason. I am fizzing, absolutely. My mic's already on, ready to go. So, joking. That was great. Obviously, I'd seen the presentation at the launch, etc., in Edinburgh. I've seen the presentation a couple of times now in terms of the information, but it might be new to some people. I know it's been an existing thing for a while that SCVO have supported, but your great presentation there gives I think a fantastic overview of why you would want to sign up. Some respects it's a bit an aid memoir to actually understanding why we try to tackle these things. So I think that's useful just from that point of view. I was going to ask what the ask was, but I think in some respects the ask for me is quite clear to people around the table at Digiren most of the time, which is about keeping it as a high priority, but also providing a wee bit of a sense of leadership at a very local level. So hopefully we are a sort of living example of what can be done if we also put our shoulder to the wheel a wee bit. James, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, a fantastic presentation, and I was delighted to be part of the discussions around the new charter. So thanks for involving us in that. I suppose for me, it's just to understand how will the SCVO monitor the progress and demonstrate impact of the charter, because I know last time you'd said I think over 700 signatories, etc. And I think it's more about the sort of outcome based rather than, for me anyway, the numbers. So how would demonstrate impact that this charter is actually helping to deliver digital inclusion?
Yeah, so you're right. We want to move away from it being a numbers game. So what we're saying consistently about this charter is it's more about quality than quantity. So as great as 700 signatories would be on this charter, I'm not interested in those signatories if they are not positively committing or contributing to digital inclusion. The charter itself, when you sign up to it rather, you go through a very brief application that just asks you to demonstrate and give examples of the work that you do. So for us, demonstrating the impact about digital inclusion in Scotland is really about building the evidence and the knowledge about what organisations are actually doing on the ground. Having that base where we can go and say, there are X organisations in Renfrewshire, for example, we know they're delivering X, Y, Z. We can link them up with other organisations. We can point people in their direction. It's really just about building that centre or that focal point for digital inclusion work in Scotland. The charter itself, not so much a delivery mechanism, more just, I guess, a hook for everybody to hang their collective digital inclusion coat on. That's the worst metaphor I think I've ever come up with.
I was just going to say, so is there, sorry Alan, just for a follow-up, I've got a couple of other things if that's okay. So is there any reporting requirements for organisations, or it's just about demonstrating potentially annually, quarterly, or whatever it is, about the impact that it's made to service users and people that organisations are supporting?
Yeah, we just ask you to fill it in again after 18 months, I think, just with an update. So it's not time intensive, it's not exhaustive, it's just a really brief overview of the work that you're doing in this space.
Excellent. And then, so I suppose that the call to action, what you'd mentioned, or the ask, Alan, earlier on, is it round about what's people's thoughts of Digiren becoming a signatory as a collective? I'm conscious that that's only one organisation that's made up of about 90 local and national organisations. And also, I suppose the other call to action would be for members to take back to their respective organisations to discuss signing up to the Digital Inclusion Charter. So again, just to get people's thoughts of if becoming a signature, Digiren itself becoming a signatory, is that something you would welcome? And then we can maybe get that as one of our priorities for 2025.
Absolutely. Yeah. absolutely, that would be fantastic. And I'm happy on an organizational level to pitch up and chat to your teams, your boards, your staff, whoever it is, just about the charter and what that involves. Have coat will travel.
Right, Jason, you've made a promise there. You'll probably get asked into lots of places. You will get tea in Renfrewshire, coffee, perhaps even the odd biscuit, you know.
Exactly.
But yeah, you'll probably get a hook. James, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think there's an opportunity here, Jason. I know we've done stuff like this with you before at SCVO to show how Digiren kind of almost attacks the charter and actually connects to the charter, almost a response to each of the 5 streams, for example. We could probably provide that quite well, I think. But obviously, there's also members who are just part of Digiren who might want to look at that from an organisational basis, as James has described. I'm not seeing a lot of other fans, and I know we've got a presentation on the very wonderful DigiKnowVember to come. So from Ross. So is there any killer questions at the end here before we move on? No, we're good. Jason, as always, I'm glad you're here. You know, as always, you know, it was good to see you and a great presentation. So we'll keep talking about the Digi Charter. Ross, do you want to come in about DigiKnowVember?
Sure, yeah. I'm just sharing the slides now, yeah. I love the idea of the digital inclusion quote, though. I have to say I have to get one of those. So I'll try and be fairly quick with this. So, okay, yep. Can everyone see the slides okay? Perfect, yeah. Okay, so just for the camera, I know most of you know me. My name is Robert Ross McNicol. I work for Renfrewshire Council as a digital participation officer, and we recently are putting together our feedback report. So it's almost complete on our DigiKnowVember programme, which is not going to surprise anyone to know happened in November. We're currently sitting around the 14-page mark. So that's just from the feedback and comments from people. So it's been wonderful seeing the sort of feedback we've got for this. And the full report should be out next week. So I've just got some sort of main points from it here. So I'll not spend long on this slide, but it's just to give you an idea of where we went into from this. For those that are maybe newly joined today, DigiKnowVember was a week of digital inclusion activities that was designed both to reach out to people in need of digital support, but also to raise awareness of the need for digital inclusion. Generally, it was intended to be free for individuals to access, and it could also be in person, online, or a combination of both, which is the hybrid approach. So looking at that week, bearing in mind when we set out to introduce this week, we would have been happy with even one event each day. We ended up with a whopping 32 events across the week. This did drop with a few cancellations, which we can explore in feedback later. I think the sheer number of events, though, alone is just a testament to the community spirit in Renfrewshire and something to be proud of on its own, and especially given the time frame that we had to organise this. So most of the DigiKnowVember activities took place in person, so hence the lack of recorded sessions we had for this. And this is a number we'd expect to see because most of the digital inclusion outreach, as you know, would likely be face-to-face with people learning the skills they would need to get online. The range of supports that people found useful when promoting the event. So most people did find the range of supports quite useful. Supports included the initial meetings and the discussion around DigiKnowVember, the social media toolkit, which was just designed to help people get a sort of step up towards promoting the events, and the printable offline program. So the online activities were also listed on the Engage Renfrewshire calendar online, and that was also linked in our program guide. So we tried to keep it quite cohesive for people. And ongoing support was also provided in terms of keeping the information up to date. So we had a few people contacting us about sort of changes to events that we would then reflect in the offline guide and the online space. And just to show you just a few snippets of the feedback we got from the day, probably one of the things we could work on actually in future years is just better ways of getting feedback directly from attendees. But the quotes from people attending were overwhelmingly positive. People really appreciated the help and support they got to get online, and many people took the skills that they learned further from the sessions. So things like obviously being very helpful thank yous, and at the end of the sessions somebody said they received many heartfelt thank yous and warm hugs. So lots of good feedback there. Feedback from the organisations. Sorry, I was just going to say briefly, sorry, I took this quote out because I thought this was particularly important. Somebody said, I learned something today I never thought I would be able to. And I thought that's something that we hear across the digital inclusion world quite often, actually. And it just highlights the kind of thing that Jason's actually speaking about with the charter, the thing that we're really trying to aim towards, trying to bring down the walls that people feel it's this impossible thing that they're facing. So definitely a sort of poignant quote from it. Just some quick collated feedback from the different organisations. So try to distill them here into some bullet points. Some of the things that jumped out to me was just the great sense of collaboration. That's what people felt worked well, the community spirit that was involved. It was also great to see that a lot of the people involved felt that they could create ongoing partnership working with people. And again, it was just a great spirit of collaboration. Again, you'll see much longer sort of feedback in the main report. Also, areas to improve. So there was some excellent feedback on the ways that we could improve this week. It was no surprise to see that the lack of lead-in time to the events was an issue for most people. And it did lead to a few cancellations as there was just not enough time to get the word out fast enough. And possibly in some ways, the amount of activities we had meant that focus might have been lessened in any one particular event. So it's something we could perhaps think about for the future. And I bolded those 2 points on the screen because that was the kind of main recurrent feedback we got from organisations. So just more advance notice for attendees and more time for organisations themselves to plan. There was also some really great points on making the social media toolkit a bit more flexible for people to put their branding into, which is a great point. And it's just one of the sort of simple changes we could make if we're running this again in the future. And as a last note, just having more physical advertising in the lead up as well. So there was some points made on it would be useful to have funding for these sort of things as well to try and get word out a bit earlier, so that people are a bit more aware. Again, for the group that we're working with here, it would be great to actually have a bit more of a physical medium. But I know going into this, we knew that it was, I suppose, just going to be a community spirit in this sense, and people just trying to get involved directly. And just as the last few points, we included a general feedback section just to make sure people could see actually what they wanted in the feedback without having it have to be positive or negative. And it was actually lovely to see that people just mostly used it for positive feedback, just sort of positive feedback about the Digiren network itself and the people that they were working with. So it was just nice to read that actually. And just as a last point as well, we put in a shout out. Because this was all about collaboration, we included a wee shout out section to people to sort of thank their partners as well. And it was no surprise that our digital champions were the star of the show here. They were mentioned the most time from all our collaborators and organisations taking part. So I would say a huge thank you to all our digital champions and all the wonderful organisations that took part. So it is great, it's very positive feedback, but there's some really great feedback actually on how we could make the DigiKnowVember better for running in the future, and definitely in terms of planning, funding, and I suppose the materials we're giving out. It's all areas we could look at. So thanks all for giving us that feedback too. That's really important. So thank you. I'll pass you back to Alan. I think I've just made it with 3 minutes to spare.
Listen, you done well. I think it was a big topic to cover, but also really important. We did feed that back to Digiren members because it was Digiren members who, in essence, made it possible, and obviously I think it's been a great success. I know James was the one who sort of proposed and we all had a good laugh about it, but the reality is it now exists. So I think we're kind of committed to next year, James, don't you think? Yeah.
100%. I think it's it can only get. What is it? What was the song? Things can only get better. It can only grow. I think I think we can make it maybe a month next year. Going by the expression of interest this year, I think it's something that we can definitely build on.
It's really, really good. I think in concluding the meeting today, because we have only a couple of minutes left, does anybody want to make any points about DigiKnowVember? Just before we kind of bring things to an end. No. I think keep an eye out for DigiI report next week. Okay. Phil, sorry, do you want to come in?
Sorry, just very quickly, I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to echo the thanks for all the efforts involved in organising DigiKnowVember. I know James and Ross and a whole range of people were all involved in that, so it's an absolutely fantastic event. You can see from the feedback there that it's been really, really well received, really worthwhile. And I know my own security and compliance team were involved in it as well in terms of the NSafe Online stuff. So yeah, a really, really good collaborative effort there. And as we were saying there, and James was alluding to, next year, already having discussions about how we can make it bigger and better, what we need in terms of support, what we need in terms of maybe some budget for it, things like that. So there's conversations going on that I'm hoping will lead to just being an annual event and just continuing to grow. So fantastic, well done everybody.
Thanks, Phil. That's great. Ross, do you want to come in? I've also got another question for somebody here as well.
Yeah, sorry, it was
Or
just really
something.
briefly to actually say what Phil just said there. Actually, I know we didn't actually underline that, but it is something we would like to run every year. Just not just based on the positive feedback, but the effect and scope that it had for people taking part. So definitely, it's on our minds. So yeah, don't be surprised if you get an email early next year for the planning phase starting.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Duncan, just a quick one.
It'll be very quickly, and it is a bit off script. We're just getting together a thing for free food and places to eat over Christmas and that. So if anyone's got anything that they want to send to me, the resources and that, I will be putting it on mainly a Word document and printing it out, because most of our service users and homeless are digitally excluded. But I'll send it out for anyone who wants to get it online to whatever platform you want there. But if you know of anywhere, let me know, and I'll get it added. Okay, we had a great resource last year. Great resources, some good places out there.
Just get it round to us, Duncan. We'll make sure we get it through our network as well, and we'll add it to our Christmas sort of section in our website as well. So absolutely brilliant. Thanks for that.
No worries.
Okay, Phil, I take it that's an old hand of yours, yes?
Yeah, I've got an old hand, sorry.
It's all right, that's fine. Okay, that's just an 11, folks. I suppose we'll just conclude things. Thanks to everybody for attending. Massive attendance as always at this meeting, which is really, really healthy and good, I think. I will say Merry Christmas, I suppose. And Kirsty, that looks like a great mug you've got for Christmas celebrations there, by the way. You want to hold that mug up as we go?
Did you see it?
Aye. Hold you up. Oh, there you go. Aye, right, okay. So in the spirit of Kirsty's mug, Merry Christmas, everybody.